thank you so much for joining in today. I understand that it was on a very short notice. Today, before we jump into the subject, which is a very interesting subject, which is very close to my heart, which talks about value stream mapping, which is, of course, the fundamental tool for operational excellence. But today we are going to talk about not only talk about value stream mapping, but we would also talk about Industry 4.0 put together. So before we jump into the subject, let me quickly introduce myself and Faber Infinite. Very quickly, I understand there are quite a few known participants, but there are a lot of them which are new. So let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Akash Borse. I'm one of the founding members at Faber Infinite. So founding partner and director at Faber Infinite. Basically, I'm a mechanical engineer and I have done masters in operations management. All my life, I have been into this very wonderful domain of operational excellence, operations management, and organizational transformation. So, over the course of past few years, almost 1.5 decades, I've worked with several organizations on continual improvement. And same is the case with Faber Infinite as well, where Faber Infinite has been working in more than 12 different countries, three different geographies, that is Asia Pacific, Africa, and Middle East. More than 300 plus clients from all different walks of life would have been catered, and they would have benefited from more than 10,000 plus successful projects that we have delivered so far. So, on that note, I welcome all of you for this wonderful session, and I thank all of you for making out the time today and participating in today's quick discussion. So, I would also take this opportunity to welcome again, and when it comes to welcoming, I would welcome you to participate in whatever ways you can. So if there are any questions, any thoughts that you would want to share during the presentation, feel free. So the time that I took for setting it up so that I can read the comments as well. So you can please go ahead and share your thoughts as well. So going further, let me start on this particular friendly note that it is not a training session. So today, of course, we have assembled, but we are going to talk about the nuances of value stream mapping and how there is an intersection between Industry 4.0 and value stream mapping that can be explored going further. So, of course, value stream mapping has been a fundamental tool, and there would be several training modules that our teams would have conducted in the past. And if required, we can conduct that in the future as well. But today we will talk about some nuances that you can keep in mind, some loopholes or gaps that needs to be addressed before you go in for value stream mapping rollout in today's time, where everybody is talking about digitalization, and Industry 4.0 implementation. So that is what we will be discussing over the course of next 15-20 minutes. Of course, there is no set time that we have agreed to end this session, but that is what I am envisaging. So before we jump onto the subject of value stream mapping, I understand that there would be participants who would be pro in operational excellence and who would be experts in value stream mapping, but at the same time there would be participants who would be still exploring what are we talking about. So what is this value stream mapping, and when we are talking about value stream mapping, what is the value in value stream mapping? So of course there would be multiple answers, but one fundamental statement that if we were to summarize, and I'm sure people participating who are experts from lean and operational excellence domain can very well correlate with the statement which is there on the screen. So value is defined as anything for which the customer is willing to pay for, in plain simple terminology. So anything, any activity, any action, any process or step which is taken on the product, on the service for which the customer is willing to pay for is what the value is. So when we are talking about any venture, any business operation, or for that matter any process, finally you are talking about performing that particular process or task is to satisfy the customer. So whether that is an internal customer or an external customer, but you're talking about creating value for the customer. So there would be plenty and plenty of pointers which would be talking about what is value and how can you not only satisfy the customer but delight the customer. And in this today's time, there are people who are talking about creating that customer wow. But finally, it all boils down to the value. So going further, when we are talking about value stream mapping, so let's set the basics right and let's talk about the fundamental definition of value stream mapping. So what is this value stream map? So what you see on the screen is a typical value stream map which is done on a piece of paper. You can convert it into soft, you can do it in the soft copy as well. We get a lot of inquiries where people talk about, do we have a software for performing or conducting value stream mapping exercise? The answer is yes and no. So there might be softwares available, but finally the power of performing or conducting a value stream mapping exercise is through a paper pencil exercise. Okay, so coming back to the definition of value stream mapping exercise, it's finally a language for all the continual improvement projects. It's a fundamental platform where it gives an opportunity for anybody to deep dive and identify where the challenges are. So it's very analogous. If I were to mention it, it's kind of taking a picture of my current day-to-day operations from a 30,000 feet view, and it gives highlights where all the challenges are across all my different operations. So right from raw material entering into the gate till it goes out as finished goods. Of course, in the little short time that we have, we will deep dive into the different elements of value stream mapping exercise, but then that is the fundamental definition of value stream mapping. Going further, I would want to highlight the basics. As it is said, if we initiate or if we start anything properly, I'm sure we would be able to derive wonderful results. So when I'm talking about all these basics and fundamentals, I wanted to assure each one of you, all the participants who have joined in today, that the attempt today would be that we have at least one takeaway that you can go ahead with, carry home and implement at your day-to-day operations in your professional life. So with that promise, let's come back to the prerequisite. Of course, the starting point for any particular project would be having a very well drafted, documented charter. Now, of course, it is no brainer, but when it comes to defining a proper and very well defined charter is very important. It's eminent for any successful project execution. So that's where when we are talking about having a project charter, it talks about, or rather it should talk about the purpose, the goal for that particular project. What is the scope and what are the expectations out of the project? So when we are talking about the fundamentals, all these basic points needs to be answered. So many of the times there have been questions that should we look at, say, factory gate to gate in to get out when it comes to our value stream mapping exercise, or should we extend it to our vendors and the customers as well? Should we also look at our other warehouses or other contract manufacturing sites as well? So there could be so many questions that might come up a little later when we start the project or when we get into the actual design. So that's where it is extremely important to set up the expectations as well as the scope right from the beginning. The next one, whenever we talk about any project, of course, we need to have a cross-functional team. So any continual improvement project, it talks about having a proper CFT or a cross-functional team. But when we are talking about defining the team, one of the most important thing is to have a proper RACI matrix done. Again, it may sound very basic, but then many of the times it is missed out. And if there is no responsibility assigned or no accountability assigned, many of the times things can be left hanging around. And that's where we need to address all such basic points as well. And last but not the least, the point that I would want to highlight here would be the key matrix that we need to measure. Because as they say, what you measure will get improved. So that's where we need to be very clear what would be our measurable key matrix or performance indicators that we'll be focusing on when we perform a value stream mapping exercise. So the summary box is what we will be talking about, but in here we are talking about having basic measures like cycle times, lead times, inventory levels, distance traveled, value adding ratio. These are some fundamental elements that we need to keep in mind. Of course, we can define all of them in today's discussion or maybe in some other discussion as well, but here we are talking about having those basic parameters put in place before we start. So all these things are fundamental. Reason being, many of the times when we get into a value stream mapping exercise, the question goes to as basic as, are our cycle times right? Are they correct? Or do we need to validate them? Because if you go back to validation, that's a completely different effort, whether it is with the consulting team or without the consulting team. But it is a very predominant effort when it comes to defining the cycle times or revalidating it. So we need to address all such points as well. So going further, when we are talking about value stream mapping, why you do a value stream map or why it is necessary for any continual improvement journey to start off with is because it talks about measuring or looking at the flow. It gives the health of my current operations. So where we are talking about not only the material flow, but we are talking about the information flow as well. And of course, needless to say, here we are not looking at only internal flow, that is factory gate in to gate out, but as well as we are looking at external flow as well. So it depends on the scope that we have decided to pick up. So that's where we look at extending it to vendors, extending it to our customers as well, looking at all the logistics functions that are involved. And as a team, as at Faber Infinite, we would have extended, we would have done such value stream mapping exercise to an extension to our vendors and customers also. But coming back, when we are talking about the value stream mapping exercise within, it's not only limited to material flow, it is also with the information flow. So it covers how my production planning system would be, how am I going to roll out a pull paste manufacturing system. So it's also addressing the information part of it. But coming back, when it comes to the material flow, it talks about how are we going to ensure that it is a continuous flow or a single piece flow. Depending on the environment, it can be defined. And once we get into it, it also gets into elements like designing the line balancing, line side design, inventory design, internal logistics, and so on and so forth. So there could be a lot of hygiene elements that can be addressed by value stream mapping. It could be fundamental as standardizing the products and processes also, because that's where we get into a future state map or future state design as well. So many of the times we get a question. I hope it's clear on the screen. We are still on the slide which is talking about types of different value stream maps that could be that could be there. Typically, we get this question from several of our prospects in the past. We have received that. So where do we focus and how do we start? So that's where there could be three or rather four different possibilities for performing a very robust value stream mapping exercise. If you notice on the screen, it says that it can start off with a department level value stream map or a process level VSM. So it's more to do with the processes that goes into any end-to-end operations, which is the next part, which is plant level value stream, which in colloquial terms can be said is factory gate in to gate out. So that kind of value stream map, if you notice, is called as plant level value VSM. Then later it can be extended to interplant level VSM, which is extended VSM, which is like suppliers and customers can also get involved. in that particular value stream mapping exercise. Now, in here, there could be one more version which can be considered as an extended part, which could be cash out to cash in. So, where we involve the flow of money as well in this particular value stream map if we decide to go ahead in that direction. So, many of the times we get a question, where do we start off with? So one of the points that I would want to highlight to all the operational excellence enthusiasts here, the easiest answer could be that we start off with a plant level value stream map. So plant level value stream is like factory gate in to gate out could be the starting point. And then once we have captured the low hanging fruits, then we can go to the higher extension or the higher level of difficulty. So I assume we are together so far. The next question comes up when we are talking about what are the phases of value stream mapping exercise. So many of the times people who are getting on or getting into this journey of operational excellence, they ask this question: what could be the different stages? So what you see on the screen are there could be three fundamental segregations, of course. So it starts with the current state map. So when we are talking about a current state map, it is what is the original or the current situation. So whatever it is, it could be a starting point depending on the standards that we have currently. But then the aim is to go to a future state, which is a better state, which is what we call it as FSM, future state map. But the reason why I'm talking about this fundamental point here is because that's not the end of it. It's not only future state map 1. Once you reach to a future state map 1, once all the targets have been achieved, it is the effort that the team should take up to go to a future state map 2 and 3 and 4. And we would I would be very happy to mention that we would have done that for several of our clients. So once the future state map 1 is achieved, the focus of the team should be that we focus on future state map 2. And there is a reason why we get into a phased improvement, where I'm sure all the enthusiasts who are following PDCA, SDCA would be able to correlate with what I am trying to convey here. But then the point is that we focus on FSM1, but we do not end there. We look at future state map 2 as well. Going further, I keep mentioning to all my prospects, several of our clients, that there is one very key important starting point here, is what we call it as PPQ analysis. So I'm not going to get into the details how this PPQ analysis is conducted, but it is basically product, process, quantity analysis. So it's kind of a combination, a matrix which is formed with the items or the products that we are going to consider, with the demand, future state demand, as well as what are the processes or the steps that it goes through. Now, why it is very important is because it is leading to designing different value streams or product families. Now, it is very, very important for any organization which is getting on with an operational excellence improvement journey is to define different value streams, because it will help you to prioritize which value stream, which product family should I focus first when it comes to starting the improvement journey. Of course, it helps you define the number of product families that are there in the ecosystem, what is the volume and the size of different product families, who is responsible for different value streams, how am I going to lay out the facility or the plant or the existing plant with respect to the different value streams that we have identified, what are the quality ratios that we are focusing on. So fundamentally, it could be the value streams could be defined based on the geography or the markets that we are catering to or the customers that we are catering to, or it could be the raw material that we are using, or it could be different kits that we are forming. So the point what I'm saying is these are some of the ways how the current value streams have been defined, but that's not the end of it. Finally, to arrive at a very logical value stream identification is that we should get into a PPQ analysis, which many of the times is missed out. So that's the point that I wanted to highlight by this effort today. Of course, when we are talking about value stream mapping exercise, a few of the elements that we need to keep in mind is that the way to read this value stream map exercise is on the topmost right hand side corner. What you see is a customer loop. Left hand side corner at the top, what you see is the supplier loop. At the top is the information loop. At the center of it, what you see is the manufacturing loop. I don't know if you are able to see my pointer, but that is something that I wanted to highlight. And at the bottom, what you see is the time ladder, lead time ladder. Now, all of these five elements are important, and it is necessary to focus on each one of them so that we do not miss out on any of the element. So, it of course it starts with the customer in place. What are the requirements? How's the information flowing from the customer to the manufacturing shop to the, and how the same information is conveyed to the supplier as well. So information is also a critical part when we are designing a value stream mapping a future state. Similarly, the lead time, where we are talking about the cycle times as well as the lead time that is there, so that we arrive at a throughput time as well. Going further, this was one of the elements that I was highlighting, where what we measure is important. And when we are talking about a value stream mapping exercise, which is a picture taken of my current operation from a 30,000 feet view, we are talking about measuring and getting the pulse of the organization. So how healthy my organization is can be measured by performing a value stream mapping exercise and measuring the material velocity ratio or the value adding ratio. So of course you get value adding time, throughput time, and non-value adding activities or the non-value adding ratio. But then it's like all of that would point out to how much is the value adding ratio. There could be so many other parameters that are important, like for example distance traveled or the transportation index. If there are a heavy material which needs to be processed, transportation index is extremely important. These days I talk to several of our clients which are into engineering domain, and for them transportation index would be extremely critical, because in a facility there could be a situation where the heavy material is moved few meters to few kilometers, and in here the bottleneck perhaps may not be in the process, but the bottleneck could be at the material handling equipment. So you can imagine how important such parameters are. Similarly, in some industries, if you're handling delicate products like, say, bone china crockery, or for that matter, glass products, number of handoffs is also very, very important to be considered, because that will have a direct impact on my quality ratios. So, all such parameters one needs to keep in mind when you're getting into a value stream mapping exercise. Okay, so now I will talk about the crux that I wanted to drive today, how value stream mapping exercise should be conducted in today's time, where we are talking about incorporating the technology piece into it. So that's where it should not be value stream mapping anymore. Today, I welcome all of you to join hands to recoin this term of VSM to VSM 4.0. So that's where when we are talking about VSM 4.0, once you have done the current state mapping exercise on a piece of paper, along with your team, the cross-functional team that we have mentioned, along with following all the steps of creating a CSM, also keeping in mind what are the measurables once you have defined the proper project charter, all of that said and done, the moment you get into identifying all the improvement initiatives or the improvement bursts. So that's where you need to keep in mind that whenever you're getting into it, it should start from the customer. It should be with respect to the customer, what customer is looking for. So whether that is an external customer or an internal customer. The next thing that one needs to keep in mind is that it should start from nearest to the customer. So all our improvement brainstorming should start from the nearest state, that is downstream, and then later you go upstream towards the vendor. Fundamentally, once you have identified all the challenges, it is no brainer that you should write it down there with the help of different Kaizen or the improvement bursts that comes to the respective stages. Now, getting on to the improvement stage, improvement initiative, for all the operational excellence professionals, I'm sure ECRS, the formula of ECRS would not be new. So, of course, when you have identified the different opportunities or challenges, you get into resolving those particular challenge or issue or bottleneck by method of this particular formula, where you get into elimination, combining, rearranging, or simplification. So all the improvement pointers that you brainstorm can be categorized in this ECRS. But today I would want to introduce one more parameter or one more dimension to ECRS, which is I. So I from the industry 4.0 era is something that we should be incorporating in ECRS. So it should not be ECRS anymore, it should be IECRS. Now, how do we incorporate all the elements from industry 4.0, or if not all, few of the major elements that would be relevant to today's manufacturing industry is what we will be talking about today. And I'll try my best to pick up some of the examples from real life. So that's where I would want to highlight what could be those different levers when it comes to the industry 4.0 and value stream mapping put together. So some of them that I have tried to highlight on the screen and we have tried to categorize it. One is where we are talking about manufacturing or operational excellence. So needless to say, when we are talking about industry 4.0, the first thing that people are talking about having smart dashboards such that we collect right information from the source and we make sense out of it and we make those smart, intelligent dashboards. So that's where having those right frameworks for capturing the OEEs or overall equipment effectiveness right from the equipments and creating a digital model such that we reach to the optimum highest level of efficiencies can be done at this juncture when you are already getting into designing a future state map 1 or 2. So that is an opportunity where once you have identified that my OE levels at stage XYZ are low, how am I going to put that on the radar and how am I going to monitor it much more rigorously, which is further more accurate and more reliable? So all such elements can be captured in. The next one is, of course, when we are talking about debottlenecking, if we are talking about looking at different operations or stations where the bottleneck has been identified during the CSM exercise, how do we debottleneck with the help of different automation tools? So I would encourage all of you to think from this perspective as well. So of course, fundamentally or historically, value stream mapping as a tool has been a no investment tool. But then when we are talking about looking at such bottlenecks or areas where we need to improve on the production or the throughput time, how we can pull out from the elements like automation, digitization in terms of further enhancing the output from the bottleneck, or rather bottlenecking, if I were to put it. The next one is looking at things from an IT perspective. So today, when we are talking about industry 4.0, it is synonymous. Many of the times people call it as industrial IoT or Internet of Things, IoT. One should look at it from a perspective of considering the cloud and security of the entire IT ecosystem. So whether that is on the cloud or whether that is on the site, how secure our network is. I'll tell you, even it may sound that it is not relevant to us as operational professionals, and it is something for the IT team to take care of. But I would say in today's time, it is extremely important, because when we are talking about that data is the new oil, data in manufacturing has always been critical, and it will be even more critical in times to come. I have personally faced this situation with one of our prospects where they were struggling for good long 6 months. That is half the financial year they were struggling because their systems crashed and they had some or other IT threat what they faced, and they were struggling big time. So it is very important for even an operational professional when you are doing a value stream mapping exercise to consider this particular facet. The next one, many of the times when we are working with several of our clients on value stream mapping exercise, the next question comes up is the manpower productivity. So whether that is India or the other developing nations, manpower productivity is on the radar, even though historically there have been cases that we were enjoying low manpower cost, but now that's not the case anymore. We need to focus on improving manpower productivity as well. So that's where having those smart measures is extremely important. The moment you start getting into improving manpower productivity, the next element that comes in, that we don't have skilled manpower or somebody who's skilled enough to look at multiple operations in one go. And that's where skill analysis, skill indexing, and creating a learning or a training plan is very, very important. And that's where I would say I'm very glad to share that we would have done such an exercise for several of our clients, right from identifying what are the skills that are required for that particular operation when we are designing the future state, such that we do not end up in a challenge in the new facility or the expansion what we were facing historically. So that's where we are talking about skill analysis and skill building by having a proper scientific skill index in place. It may sound fundamental, but then it is many times it is missing. And the next one is, once you have defined how the future state would be, how am I going to monitor that? In fact, just before getting onto this particular LinkedIn Live, I got a call from a client, a very old client, where we worked on operational excellence. And the next challenge, what he was mentioning, that how do we incorporate it in the measurement? And that's where this particular smart performance management system can come into picture. And when we are talking about today's time incorporating tech in anything and everything that we do, there are technology solutions available for not only designing the performance management system, but also ensuring that it is monitored and it is in sync with the future state map that is designed. Right? The next one, when we are talking about supply chain, it has been said, it's a cliched statement that organizations don't compete, it is the supply chain which is competing these days. And when we are talking about supply chain management and optimization, we are talking about getting and leveraging the digital aspect of it. So we would have worked with several organizations on designing the inventory models, but at the same time designing the supply chains and integrating it with the existing or the new ERP what the clients are looking forward to. So that's an element that one needs to incorporate. So whether it could be e-Kanban or it could be different inventory models that can be incorporated in the existing ERP system, that needs to be considered. The next one is where we are talking about maintenance practices, improving machine and maintenance reliability. In today's time, where we are talking about connected machines, there have been solutions where we are talking about that the machines can throw insights remotely what went wrong at the machine through different sensors. So all such elements can be kept in mind for critical equipments when you are designing the future state map. So I would say whenever you are getting into a value stream mapping exercise in today's time, it is incomplete if we do not consider elements from Industry 4.0 perspective. So that's the point that I wanted to highlight and bring to the table in today's quick discussion. I would just end this particular talk today and I would open it up for questions. The last point that I would want to highlight, that whenever you get into a future state mapping exercise, I would say it is a very right relevant time to get into an assessment along with the current state map. We get into an assessment of Industry 4.0 readiness. So there could be several organizations who can help you with. You can design it on your own. You can reach out to us. Faber Infinite has designed a very complex, comprehensive Industry 4.0 readiness assessment, which focuses on all the elements that you need to keep in mind from an Industry 4.0 perspective when you are designing the future state map 1 or 2. And I'm sure all of you will agree that it is an ongoing exercise. It's a never ending exercise when it comes to continual improvement. So, whether you are doing a future state map 1, 2, 3, or maybe 100 future state map, it is always a right time to get into an analysis and assessment on how ready we are for incorporating Industry 4.0 in our operations. So, on that note, I think we have reached to the end of the key points or few of the points that I wanted to highlight. I would not say that it is a comprehensive training of value stream mapping or Industry 4.0, but these are some of the elements that I thought would be extremely relevant in today's time, and I wanted to touch upon few of them. So I would be very happy to address any of the thoughts, any comments, questions that any one of you have. I think I can still read them in the comments. Yes, so we have questions flowing in. So I would take that question. So when we do, if we have any more questions, feel free to post them in the comments. Before I answer the questions, let me take this opportunity to thank all of you who have joined in, who logged in, registered for this quick session that we planned, which was kind of an impromptu session. I hope it was value adding, and as I promised, I hope there is at least one key takeaway for each one of you that you can go and implement. So yeah, so the question that we have is, how does value stream mapping exercise help to identify waste in processes? Okay, very interesting question. I understand that I did not touch upon it considering the time, but I would take this opportunity to answer this question. So when we are talking about value stream mapping exercise, as I already mentioned, that it is a exercise where we kind of take a picture of my current operation from 30,000 feet view. So when you get on to for conducting a value stream mapping exercise, you get on to designing or defining the what is the current state look like. And when we are defining the current state, when we are drawing a current state map, we are looking at each and every step, process by process, as in we are looking at each and every process, right from raw material entering the gate till it goes out as finished goods. Now, in process of doing this, we are identifying how much time that the material is taking at all different stations, how much inventories that we have at all different stages, whether that is finished goods, WIP, raw material, or at any different pockets. We also go about identifying how much is the overall equipment effectiveness, how are the quality ratios performing at all different stations, how much is my manpower productivity at all different stations. We also get into macro indicators in terms of how my information flow is, how my production planning mechanism is. That is also throwing light in terms of where do we have inventory pockets, how it is defined. But at the same time, we go into, or rather we should go into micro details, like for example, how much is the absenteeism percentage at XYZ station? Is it impacting my overall material velocity? So the reason why I'm getting into all such details is the moment you start asking all these questions in the data box for each and every station, it will automatically highlight the challenges, what are present in the entire value stream map or a specific process. You can, based on which you can identify where the bottlenecks are. You can categorize all these particular inefficiencies into those 7 or 7+1 conventional waste as well. So it's like the moment you get into a current state mapping exercise, once you follow all the steps, you would be able to identify all these challenges as we progress. So I hope I was able to do justice and answer the question that was raised here. Right. Yeah. So thank you so much for that question. Do we have any more questions, any thoughts that are coming in? Right, okay. So I presume that we have no more questions. Okay, sounds good. So, okay, so on that note, since we have no more questions, I take this opportunity to thank all of you once again on behalf of the entire team at Faber Infinite for sparing that those 45 minutes for today's discussion, which I'm sure would add value to your operational excellence journey, and you would be able to take up a thoughtful value stream mapping project. Okay, we have one more question which says that, okay, we have two more. Okay. How do you select appropriate scope for a value stream mapping project? Okay. Interesting, interesting. So, okay, so now when we are talking about how do you define the scope, it completely depends on what are the challenges that any organization is facing on the ground. So, there is no set answer to it. But then, what I can tell you is that what could be the logical starting point would be where we are looking at the scope, which is factory level value stream. So, where we are talking about gate in to gate out. So why I say so, because all the operations which would be there within the factory would be under our control. So that is where we have very less external factors which may not be in our control. At least let's set our house correct first, and that's where we can extend it to others once we have captured the low hanging fruits. Second point, why I would say that we should not go maybe one step below looking at process level value stream. Even that can be done if that is extremely challenging, and if we are talking about gate in to gate out is too complex and too difficult to bite at one go. But then when we are talking about a holistic improvement, it is extremely important that we look at factory level gate in to gate out. Having said that, there have been situations where we have discussed and deliberated this in the past, that even if we are talking about factory level value stream, but still that is one small piece of the entire value chain. And we should look at, if we are looking at the efficiency of the entire ecosystem, we should look at, say, entire value stream for the entire value chain, right from, say, cash out to cash in, and that's where the real efficiencies can be brought in. But at least it's like it depends on the situation, where do you want to start off with. Okay, next question is, how can VSM be used to improve process efficiency? Okay, so when we are talking about process efficiency, one of the measures that we are talking about, if you ask me, is of course throughput time. But then if I were to put it in the right context, or the way I would put it is looking at the material velocity ratio. So the process efficiency, in my opinion, would be defined by how good my material velocity ratio is. If you are able to improve the material velocity ratio, automatically you will be able to improve the process efficiency as well. So here, when we are talking about value stream mapping or a future state mapping exercise, in the first phase, we are still talking about looking at all the inefficiencies in the system. So when we are talking about process efficiency, we are still talking about eliminating all the inefficiencies in the system and not touching the cycle time in the first go. We can definitely touch upon the cycle times for the bottleneck operations, because that will have an impact on the entire larger ecosystem that we have considered. So to answer your question, if you are able to improve the material velocity ratio, I'm sure it will have a positive impact on the process efficiency as well. Again, it's like it's little broad for me to answer, because it's like, which process are we talking about? I'm assuming here we are talking about in discrete manufacturing industry. Right. I hope I was able to address the points that were raised. So I assume that there are no more questions since we did not see them. Okay, so I take this opportunity once again to thank all of you for this particular wonderful evening that we spent together online, of course. And if there are any more questions that you have, feel free to reach out to us. If there is anything that you would want to discuss about value stream mapping or value stream mapping 4.0, or for that matter, industry 4.0 readiness audit, feel free to reach out to any one of us. Our coordinates are there on the screen, or you can reach out to us on faberinfinite.com. Thank you so much.